Backslide by Black K. Cat. Chapter 30. Resurrection. Obito is not a good man. Regardless of what some people, like Naruto or Kurama, or whatever he's calling himself in this time, might think, he's not. Really, truly. Maybe once, a very long time ago, when he was just a child. But now? Here? He's ruined far too many dreams, stolen far too many lives, for that believed to be anything but blatant falsehood. But still, he's better now than he has been in well over a decade. And maybe if repentant isn't enough to redeem him, better can be. The seal that holds him, holds the very last remnants of his soul and will and memories, is the kind that likely only Kurama could manage to create with no warning in the middle of nowhere with a dying man on his lap. It's complex and carefully wrought, delicate and devastating in its breadth of comprehension, allowing Obito far more freedom than other seals would, and some fair measure of autonomy. So he knows the moment Kurama feeds his chakra into it, the moment that the world he's created for himself begins to bleed and warp and change, he feels it like silk sliding against his skin, the transfer, the change in bodies he inhabits. Toby is an entirely different creature than Obito, mad and merciless and truly dark, but at the same time they're one soul. Regardless of personalities, the only real difference between them is time and memories. And those are bound up in the seal that houses Obito, tied to his soul so that he can never lose himself. They're the same soul, the same person, and Kurama's seal recognizes that. It's not so much overwriting that happens, really, as adding. There's a rush of chakra, a flicker of reality warping and bending, and then Obito is alone in his body. The two separate souls seamlessly merging into one. No struggle for dominance because he's alone in his body with memories that Toby didn't have a moment ago and a form that Obito didn't until this second. Being given a form again is amazing. Obito takes his first breath in almost 6 years, or 3 seconds, depending on one's point of view. The very first thing to hit his nose is the copper-rich reek of freshly spilling blood, and as soon as that registers, he becomes aware of the slumped weight in his arm. The silken curtain of garnet hair spilling over his shoulder, and matching the color of the blood seeping from a gut wound. Obito sighs, rolling his eyes and hefting Kurama up a little more. You're a moron, brat. Really? This is your grand plan? I thought we talked about your self-sacrificing streak. Idiot. There's no answer, of course, unless Obito's willing to count severe bleeding. He restrains another eye roll. And it's weird to have two eyes again when he hasn't since Radama reclaimed his in the first war, because they just tend to abuse the red-headed brat, and lowers himself and his burden to the ground. Oka, he calls, knowing that if they're close enough, her sharp ears will pick it up, and if they're not, one of the other summons doubtless can and will relay the message. Oka, come save your idiot master before he blades out completely, please! Barely 30 seconds later, a gray form crashes through the bush, and the five-tailed vixen skids to a halt beside them, flickers of silver light already gathering around her tails. Not for the first time, Obito thanks whatever vaguely merciful higher power there is that Kurama contracted with the foxes. They are, on the whole, far more useful than the toads, who are largely fighters and nothing else. The Kitsune and Yoko are creatures of chakra, first and foremost, warriors second, and the brat needs all the help he can get to curb that stupidly reckless streak he's always had. The others, he asks Oka when he deems it safe to interrupt her concentration. The gut wound has stopped oozing, at least, and from what Obito can see through Kurama's tank top, it's already starting to close. The vixen will likely be exhausted afterwards, and it's the kind of thing that Kurama would never ask her to do for him, but Obito understands her sentiments more than Kurama's. Better to push oneself to the very brink and over, rather than risk losing someone precious. My sister is following the genin now that Orochimaru is most emphatically dead. Oka murmurs, deep green eyes unwavering as silver sparks crawl over her fur. She won't interfere unless they run into another outside force, but we thought it best to play things safe. Ran and Momiji are recovering from dealing with Manda, and Fuji is following Itachi back to the Hokage. Kaede is still with the swordsman. Everything is working out as he planned. This time, Obito really does roll his eyes. Except for Kurama getting a kunai to the stomach, he mutters, wanting to smack the unconscious redhead, but settling for stroking his fingers through his hair instead. Idiot. Oka snorts in amusement. Likely he was worried about finishing quickly, she says, eyes flickering briefly towards the cocoon of roots and branches that are covering Obito's old teammate. He's leaving them in place for now, just in case Kakashi wakes up before he and Kurama can concoct a fairly convincing cover story. Studying her patient wearily, the fox shifts away and says, "That's the best I can do, Obito-san. Unfortunately, I'm not very familiar with human anatomy, so it's barely a patch job, just enough to keep his blood inside him until we can get him to a medic." "Yeah, good enough," Obito mutters wryly, running a hand over his face. It's a surprise to feel the orange mask, and he tears it off with a grimace, resenting everything that it represents. How many years did he play Madara with this thing? Too many, regardless of the actual number. With a savage snarl, he hurls it away and watches with grim satisfaction as it strikes the bole of a tree and shatters into pieces. All he can remember when he looks at it is a mocking voice and taunting eyes, a body sprawled motionless on the rocky floor of a deep ravine, an orange book that no longer exists, a man who no longer exists, 1,001 atrocities committed with his own hands and under the influence of his madman of an ancestor. He curses, raking his hands through his hair, because didn't he go through this once already? "Your mouth is absolutely ridiculous," a dry voice puts in, humor just covering the pained rasp to it. "Stop it, or my ears might start bleeding too." Obito drops his eyes to the shinobi laying with his head in Obito's lap. "Shut up," he orders with a glower. "You are an absolute idiot, and if I have gray hairs after this, I am going to kill you." Kurama snorts and pushes himself up on one elbow, arching an expressive brow. "And you say you're not a megalomaniacal mass-murdering psychopath anymore?" "Not mass-murdering, just you. Then I can die happy, you reckless brain-dead brat. And I'm reformed, thanks." Obito rolls his eyes before he can stop himself, checks surreptitiously to make sure that Kurama isn't about to keel over again, and slides to his feet. The cloak is stifling, choking like it's made of the very thickest wool rather than like cotton, and he tears it off without remorse. He's halfway tempted to toss it up in the air and hit it with a fireball jutsu, but before he can, a hand on his arm stops him. Kurama is watching him with amusement and faint sympathy, on his feet with one hand twisted into Oka's ruff. She's leaning against him just as much as he is against her, though, so with a put-upon sigh and a muttered, "What do you think you're doing, brat?" Obito wraps an arm around Kurama's waist for support. "Such a sap," the redhead mutters fondly, thumping a friendly fist against his shoulder and raising his right arm. The storage seal there is glowing light violet, and as Obito watches, Kurama pulls a set of all-black shinobi clothes out of it and hands them over. "Go," he orders, sinking back to the ground. Oka gives a relieved huff and flaps down next to him, propping her jaw up on his knee. "We're about the same size, so those should fit. Change, some back, and we'll set everything up." Slightly wary, Obito eyes Kurama for a moment. "Everything?" That gives him a beaming smile in response. "For your return to life, of course." Obito should have learned long ago, with Naruto, or Kurama, or whatever he wants to call himself. Most of the time, he's really better off not knowing. Sarutobi is already on edge well before his two Jokujo guards burst into the office, and has been for a while. Tsunade, for all her words about learning a Hokage's job, hasn't paid more than passing attention to anything that's happened, her gaze more often than not fixed out the window in the direction of the Forest of Death. Her mere presence is suspect too, because Sarutobi has known her since she was a little girl, and he remembers very, very clearly just how hard it always was to get her to do mission reports and paperwork of any sort. Therefore, he's not really that surprised when a sudden surge of chakra rises from Training Ground 44, though it's quite a bit stronger than he had expected. After all, that's where the tuning exams are taking place, and Sarutobi has witnessed and participated in enough S-class fights to recognize one easily. Maybe if the participants had stuck to common low-ranked jutsus, he could have dismissed it as two very powerful genin, especially given that this batch contains the Yondame Kazekage's children, the Yondame Hokage's son, and Kyuubi Jinchuriki, and the genius youngest son of the Uchiha clan head. But this is far beyond any genin, and moreover, both of these chakra signatures feel familiar, one more so than the other. He's on his feet the moment the shinobi's identity registers in his mind, is just trying to decide whether he should head for the door when Tsunade takes a step in front of him, her expression equal parts grim and weary and sad. "Sensei," she says softly. He meets those soft brown eyes and understands in half a heartbeat both why she's here and why she came. Orochimaru was always his pride, his genius pupil, right up until the moment he betrayed Konoha. And ever since, Orochimaru's actions have been an ache, a wound that doesn't heal, carved deep into his heart, because he's always wondered where he went wrong, what he did or overlooked that led to this situation. He is the Saindame Hokage, the god of shinobi, but where Orochimaru is concerned, he is simply a failed mentor and can never keep a clear head. So he stops, forces his feet to stillness, and takes a slow, deep breath, even as Genma and Raito burst into the room and immediately separate, Genma taking up position by the window, Raito by the door. They don't say anything, and as he wrestles his thoughts back under control, he's glad for it. "The children," he says at length, glancing into the shadows where he knows his Anbu guard team is watching. With his regular guards here, he's free to deploy them, and silently thanks the Tokujo team for being so sensible. "Create a perimeter and try to get all examinees out of range. Then close in. Pull Anbu patrols if you have to. Take anyone you need, but move quickly." But even as he speaks, a new chakra signal appears, equally strong, moving erratically and with a truly blinding speed, faster even than Minato's Hiraishin, Sarutobi thinks, and crashes into the battle and then is gone a split second later, taking Kurama with it. Tsunade gasps, spinning around to face the window like she's about to leap out and go to help, and Sarutobi is tempted to let her because he has watched Team 7 practice, recognizes the comparatively weak flickers of chakra that rise up against Orochimaru's sun brilliance like fireflies in the face of a bonfire, and knows that they'll be killed. Black flames visible even from this distance as they flare over the treetops and then recede, and Sarutobi closes his eyes as Orochimaru's chakra disappears completely. "Oh, my boy, what a crooked, misguided path you walked to lead you here to this." "Go," he orders the Anbu, still tense and wary behind him. "Make sure the incident is contained and that Team 7 is uninjured." 5 black blurs too fast to follow, and they're gone. "Kurama," Tsunade murmurs, eyes fixed on another section of forest, well away from Orochimaru's fight. Chakra is still flaring, but not as powerfully, as though the two combatants are testing the waters rather than diving headfirst into a battle. Another flare, this time familiar, as Kakashi joins the battle, and then Tsunade's breath catches in her throat, and Sarutobi can see her eyes go wide, her face drain of blood as that violet chakra flickers and then dwindles like water running down a drain. "No," she whispers, and when she leaves the office at a run, Sarutobi doesn't try to stop her. He doesn't quite understand the connection those two have so soon after their first meeting, but he knows that expression on Tsunade's face, knows that when she commits herself to something, she does so wholeheartedly and without hesitation, and this shows all the signs. "Good luck," he murmurs, to an office empty of all but himself and his 2 stalwart guards. But then suddenly there's another presence slipping in through the window, and Sarutobi is entirely resigned to unexpected appearances today. This one, at least, is both welcome and not an enemy. "Team 7 won't need it, Hokage-sama," the crow-masked Anbu says, faint amusement in his tone. "I believe they are relying on skill and teamwork instead." Because Itachi would hardly be looking so level-headed if his little brother was in danger, Sarutobi allows himself to relax faintly. "Team 7 is well then, I take it?" he asks, moving back to his seat behind the desk. Itachi inclines his head. "Yes, Hokage-sama. When I arrived, they had already managed to sever Orochimaru's arm and were in the process of retreating. I told them to continue on to the tower, seeing as they were already in possession of their second scroll. With a sigh that is purely relief, Sarutobi settles back in his chair and inclines his head. He isn't going to ask what happened to Orochimaru. It's already clear, and regardless, some things are better left unsaid. But he can say, "Good job, Crow. Thank you." A slight hesitation, and he adds, "Sasuke-kun?" When that soft voice comes again, the smile underneath the mask is clearly audible. He had already made his choice when I arrived, and that choice was his team. Sarutobi smiles, because he remembers very well how Danzo had always warned against leaving Sasuke alive, regardless of it being Itachi's condition. It is satisfying to see that such worry was unfounded.
I see. Well, should they beat the exam record, perhaps we will have to come up with a new title for them. After all, the Sannin are a broken team, and Team 7 is clearly not.
He considers for a moment, tickled by the idea, and chuckles.
Yes, for facing down one of the Sannin, for holding fast. I think they've earned themselves a name.
Kakashi comes awake slowly, finding a persistent throbbing in his head and a deep ache in his throat. He's in the open air. He could tell without even opening his eyes out of that cage of branches, and there's a faint scorched scent lingering on the wind, ashen chalk, and the faintest edge of melted plastic. It's only after a moment that the sound of voices registers, low murmurs just within range of his senses, when he stretches.
Dig it, you're not going to need to use that time reversal thing again?
Seal, you barbarian! It's a space-time seal! And how were you a student of Konoha's greatest Fujutsu master when you can't even get the terminology right? Yeah, alright, I get it. You're seal, then. Happy with the set of circumstances? An aggrieved sigh, a rustle of cloth and hair, and Kurama bemoans. You say that like it's easy to jump through time, when I had to tie the thing to star movements to get enough chakra. Do you have any idea how difficult that is? I'm fairly certain you're going to tell me regardless of whether I want to know or not. And no more picking on my language, brat. You're just as bad. Because you're infecting me! Breathe, brat. You're turning purple. Oh god, are you sure you patched him up all the way? Kakashi loses the thread of the conversation then, but it's fine because pieces to a puzzle he hadn't even known existed are snapping into place, sliding together to form a complete and startling picture that should be blindingly confusing, but instead just makes sense. Oh, Kakashi thinks, a little dazedly. I see now. It's possible he wanders in and out of incredulity for a little while, because even knowing Minato and his incredibly complex, beautifully intricate seals, time travel is still a new concept, and a fairly large one to wrap his head around, and Kurama is from another time. Past? Future? He's young, but he knows about Uzushio, though as far as that goes, he's also uncannily good with Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura. Do I really want that answered? No, not really, honestly. So either he's a cradle robber or a grave robber. Wonderful. Neither thought sits well with Kakashi, so he pushes the matter out of mind and tunes back in. Many times do I have to call you an idiot before it gets through to you, brat? Oh. Oi, Kakashi. How long are you just going to lie there and play dead? Kakashi's breath catches in his chest, as sharp and painful as a dagger to the gut, because only one person has ever called him that. He wrenches upright, all thoughts of time travel in Kurama's age completely obliterated by the sight of the man sitting in the middle of the clearing. He's not tall, only about Kurama's height, with spiky, untamable black hair and deep scars carved into the right side of his face. 2 eyes, both Uchiha black, but bright, with a humor most of the clan wouldn't have known if their lives depended on it. Wry mouth, not open and shouting, but curled into a fond half-smile that's edged with mocking affection. Scars carved into the right side of his face. Kakashi stares, unable to catch his breath, unable to move so much as a muscle, because... Obito? He whispers, and then can't think of a single solitary other thing to say. The man smiles at him, the mockery edging out until it's pure affection, warm and bright. Yeah, Kakashi, he answers, rising to his feet in a smooth, graceful movement Obito as a child never could have managed. But it It fits his frame, his lean muscle and lithe poise, and Kakashi wants to cry because this is the shinobi he always thought Obito could have been, if not for a stupid sacrifice saving Kakashi's life that day. There's no pause for questions as to how he survived, no hesitation, no waiting. Kakashi is on his feet and across the clearing before he can even consider any other choice of action, though he doesn't think he would even if he could. He grabs Obito, feels warm skin beneath his fingers, solid, not a ghost or chakra impression or something else, solid and real, and drags him forward, wraps his arm around the man who's been his best friend since his death and now can be his best friend in life as well. Not a dream and a half-hearted wish, but a reality. Arms come around him in return, slightly more tentative, but just as tight, and Kakashi can feel the resonance between the pair of eyes they share, the twin Migenko split between them. There is no doubt, then, that this is Obito. Obito is alive. Kakashi, he hears murmured right into his ear and rough with choked emotions. There are tear marks on his vest, and he wants to laugh at that, wants to call Obito a crybaby ninja again, but can't, because his heart feels like it's about to explode from concentrated happiness. You're such a jerk. I haven't cried in years, and you have to go and make me. Kakashi, I missed you so much. Kurama is smiling at them when Kakashi opens his eyes, warm and sweet and soft, and it doesn't matter that he's from another time, not exactly who he claims to be, because claims aside, Kakashi has seen who he is, and that's more than enough for him. Obito lets him go reluctantly, rubbing the back of his scarred hand over his face and very determinedly not looking at anyone. With a huff, he spins on his heel and stalks back over to where Kurama is leaning back against a gray fox and watching them both, humor in his blue eyes, and throws himself to the ground. Kakashi trails after him, taking in the signs of wind and fire jutsus used in the clearing and the burned patch of grass off to the side. There's a charred scrap of fabric fluttering away in the breeze, black with a design of red clouds, and on the edge of the blackened grass is a piece of an orange mask, warped and melted until it's nearly unrecognizable. Madara, Kurama says suddenly, and Kakashi drags his gaze away from what was clearly a pyre to meet those blue eyes that have suddenly gone cold. Kurama returns the gaze, chin tilted up and jaw tight with what is clearly painful anger. He called himself Madara. Possibly the original. Possibly not. But either way, he was the one controlling the Akatsuki. Obito took him out from behind while I distracted him. He's not a threat anymore. Kakashi takes a seat on the grass, watching both men and recalling their easy banter. I take it you know each other then? He asks a little wryly. Obito meets his gaze too and reaches up to tuck his finger against his scars. Madara saved me, he says flatly, and that emotion in his voice is a world away from gratitude. He pulled me out of the rock slide and took me to the mountain's graveyard, where he experimented on my body with Hashirama's cells until I was the kind of creature he wanted, and then he let me go just long enough for me to see Rin commit suicide via Chidori. Kakashi stiffens, but forces himself to stay still. He remembers the way Obito practically worshipped their teammates and braces himself for any sort of retaliation. It would be Obito's due, after all, since Kakashi promised him and then broke that promise. But instead, Obito just gives him a slightly weary, pained smile. Stop it, Kakashi. That was a long time ago, and it was her choice, made in order to save Konoha. I just wish she hadn't used you to do it. That was cruel. But Madara took advantage of the situation to slap a cursed seal on me, and I was his mindless minion until Kurama broke the seal and freed me. Because he's not an idiot, Kakashi hears the whole wealth of things that go unsaid in that explanation, the layers and horrors that Obito is leaving out. But for now, it's enough, and he won't push. Maybe he'll never push, because Obito is alive, and never in Kakashi's wildest dreams was he brave enough to imagine that. He reaches out, clasps Obito's shoulder, and tugs Kurama against his side, in the middle of a battle-scarred clearing, with the ashes of Konoha's greatest enemy cooling behind them. Kakashi is happier than he's ever been. than he's ever imagined being. And it's so good that he just wants to laugh or cry or something. But he grips Obito's shoulder, holds Kurama tightly, and says with all the lightness in his heart and soul, "Welcome home."